Imagine practicing clinical dentistry for 14 years, sometimes 12-hour days, and then eventually building a dental group with your husband to be told by an incoming associate that they want to work 4 6-hour days and make upwards of $300,000 a year. That's some of the stories that Dr. Anushka Gaglani has that she talks about on our podcast today, and her current struggle of identifying and relating to the new generation of associates that are coming out with fantasy or a misperceived expectation of like to be a dentist in today's climate based on income and output. Dr. Anushka is someone that I really respect in the industry because she shares openly about her process and some of her struggles and also some of her highlights in building an emerging dental group in today's dental landscape. She doesn't sugarcoat the truth, and that's something that I really stand for. And in our conversation today, too, we talk about really getting to know yourself and why that's so important in becoming a leader in this industry, and why leadership training, mindset development, and communication training is so critical to be successful in today's workplace. And I love it because, quite honestly, everything she talks about is everything that I have inside the Empowered Leadership Experience for Women in Dental, and it really continues to highlight and validate the work that I'm doing from the coaching perspective and the work she's committed to in being a leader in this space. And I really adore her and appreciate the time that she spent with me on today's podcast. Dr. Anushka, welcome to the Real Talk of Dental. I'm so excited for our conversation today. I have been very persistent in having this conversation with you, so I'm super grateful that we finally got the time to do it. Really fell in love with you on LinkedIn with your very pointed posts. I always really appreciated your opinions, and you seemed like somebody who had a lot to say, and you also add a little bit of spice and sass into some of the stuff you talked about. And I was like, she's my kind of doctor. I really love what she's talking about here. And you and your husband you're, I guess, in the emerging group space. As you shared, you're just about to close on your 8th office. You've been at this for about a decade, and you have a lot to say about what you've experienced and where you are now and all of the insight that you have. So we're just going to dive right into it. And you are also somebody that's super committed to the business side of dentistry too. So you're also going to school for business now, which is really incredible. Not a lot of docs do that. So hats off to you for taking that on too. And so yeah, share what your experience, I guess, just from an overview of where you started and where you're at now.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was honestly such a kind intro. I really appreciate that. And, for what it's worth, I felt the same way when I saw your post and when we connected. I was like, oh my gosh, this is someone I want to know. I think you're doing so many great things for the industry as well. So thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking really forward to this. So, where I started, I kind of, going way back when I wanted to be a dentist since I was 14, and I just, I kind of went for it. Thought at some point when I graduated that I would own a practice. I didn't realize it would end up being multiple practices and that I would actually really enjoy that path. I have to give a lot of credit to my husband, Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj, because I think he's the one that, he went to NYU and he met a lot of really great doctors there and some of the big names in the industry. And he learned a lot about kind of the multi-practice and different paths that you could take that aren't just, having the one practice. So we kind of opened our first practice together. It was a small practice that was established, but the owner was probably close to 70. The revenue was around 200,000 or so a year. So I remember driving in, and now I would never do something like this, but I remember driving to the parking lot and being like, I have a good feeling about this. That is not the way I recommend anybody buy a practice today, and I would never do that, but it felt right, and it's ended up being a great practice for us. But we both practiced there together, and about 6 months in, we were like, "Okay, we're together every single day, all day, so we're going to go add more practices," and that's kind of where we are today. It's funny because it's full circle. Now I love spending all day with him, and I think he would say the same, so it's kind of fun to see how we've grown together.
Yeah. And do you think that you just had this like crazy optimism when you first started out, and were you driven a lot in the beginning by, I saw something once about entrepreneurs and how there's a level of insanity that you have to have in like the early stages of being an entrepreneur because no one in the right mind would go that route if they knew what they were signing up for. And that even resonated with me. And it kind of even got under my skin a little bit because there were many days where I thought, oh my gosh, am I insane or is this actually possible? And clearly, very different businesses that we have, and you have much greater stakes than I do. But I feel as if it's pretty true. Like there's equal parts optimism and then also a level of moderate insanity because you have to have this belief in so many things that it's going to work out. And there's so much risk.
I completely agree with that, and I actually would argue that that insanity never goes away, especially when you're in growth phase, because every level I've realized has another new set of capabilities that you have to unlock. There's a new set of problems. Like every time I turn around, I'm like, wait, this was not what was happening at practice 1, and then when we get to practice 3, oh my gosh, it's a whole new set of problems that I couldn't have kind of anticipated. So, I think that's very true. I think really have to be willing to do the hard things, and you have to understand that initially, until you get to a certain stage, you are going to be doing all of the hard things. And I think to some extent, I see a lot on, like, social media, on Instagram, and everyone's telling people, "Be an entrepreneur, have a side hustle," but I think they really glorify it, and there's a lot that happens on a day-to-day that, really it's really not for the faint of heart. You really have to be very resilient and be able to kind of spring back because there are so many things that come at you, and the bigger you get, those problems don't go away, they just compound.
Yeah. And the problems get bigger usually, right? The greater the risk. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. And like, I'm sure you'd agree, the work never leaves. Like, it's not like you just kind of at the end, 5 o'clock, you're done, you're coming home and kicking up your shoes and putting on some, Desperate Housewives or something. Like it just doesn't work that way. It's like
Rachel.
always in your mind. And even if you try to do that, it's like still in the back of your mind, you're multitasking on your phone or something. So, I mean, a decade in, I mean, that's a substantial amount of time. I'm sure for you, it feels like it's a blip of time, but 10 years is, pretty solid. And what happened that you didn't even expect, over the last decade? I guess if you were to tell yourself 10 years ago, hey, watch out for this or be prepared for this, like what would it be?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago when I started, I didn't realize how much of a leader I'd have to grow into, right? Everyone kind of comes in. I think I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I think a lot of people come in thinking, well, I'm going to be the boss and I'm just going to kind of tell people what to do and they're going to do it. And oh no, that is so far from reality. It's a lot of let me put it this way. One of the things I'd heard in the beginning was you can either tell, sell, or collaborate with people. And I think in today's world where I first started, I was probably more of a tell, like, hey, do this. And I realized like the way that the world is today, a lot of people they want the why or they want it's not just the how, it's the why. Why are we doing this? So I've really become more of like a collaborative leader, more of like a servant leader. But yeah, 10 years ago, I think I would have really invested a lot more in becoming that type of leader a lot earlier because there were a lot of learning experiences along the way.
Yeah, I saw this post recently online, and I'm curious what your response would be. The question was, what courses would you recommend an associate take in their first like 2 to 3 years of work? And some of the dentists that were responding to that question were more about like, skills that would help them be more productive as a dentist. But I'm curious what your response would be to that based on what you just shared.
Yeah, that is such a great question. I have very, very strong feelings about this. I think the main thing that a new dentist coming out of school has to learn is how to communicate with people. And when I say people, I'm talking patients, I'm talking team members, I'm talking their owner. It's everybody, right? I think when a lot of new grads, when they come out of school, that is their first job. Some of them have had some work experience, but I would say for the majority of them, it's their first real job. So, what they sometimes don't understand is that the team, you have a doctor in front of your name. That does not mean you're better than anybody. You are the same as everybody else, but that doctor automatically look to you and think you're my leader. You're the one I should follow. And I remember we had an associate once, he'd been working somewhere else. He was a year out of school and he came to us with a conundrum. He said, I don't know how I should be with the team. Should I be friends with them? Should I be above them? We told him neither. You should not be friends. You can be friendly, but at the end of the day, again, they're looking to you as their leader, and you are not above them because you're a human being just like them. That said, they are watching everything you do and they're listening to everything you say. So you do have to show up in a way that they can respect and a way that they can follow, even if you have zero experience and they have 15 years of experience. That's just reality. So I would say to new grads, take communication courses. I would say nonviolent communication is a great way to do it. And, no finger pointing. And the second is mindset courses. It's really, really important. I think a lot of new grads struggle with things like, looking at social media, sitting on Reddit, comparing to other people, the highlight reels of Instagram, and none of that's real. And I think I went through it too at that age. There's a lot of thinking that that's all real stuff. And as I age, I realize it's smoke and mirrors, a lot of it. So you really just have to be very grounded and level-headed. And I think taking mindset courses really helps with that.
Yeah, and you and I agree on that. I had similar responses, and also threw in, emotional intelligence, because I think that also complements the communication aspect too. And a lot of young grads, and I mean, heck, even a lot of, docs have been at it for 40 years, still struggle with that level of emotional intelligence of like reading a room and understanding what your team members are dealing with, or the patients even, and just having that awareness, of what's going on in the space that you're occupying, and not being so hyper focused on your needs and what you want. And yeah, the communication is a huge piece. And I find that really interesting because I also coach a lot of associates as well. And it is really interesting. There's often this conundrum that a lot of associates find themselves in, where typically they're younger, and so they're closer to the age range of the team compared to, say, maybe the owner doctor at times. And they want to be liked, right? And teams can be tough. I've definitely seen teams eat associates alive if they're like, we don't like this person, we don't like their clinical care standards. And teams can really build a case against associates. Like, I've seen that happen as well. And so they kind of want to be one with the team, and there's sort of this camaraderie, and they want to be in the trenches and be liked and be the cool one and be everybody's bud. And it becomes this issue typically with the owner doctor, because now there's like a gap, in trust and where the team members go to. And then it really puts the associate in a tough spot, because then when they're trying to grow and level up in their own leadership, the team will not take them seriously. And I've seen that happen so many times, where they're like, oh, you're going to start setting boundaries now, or have these agreements you want me to abide by. Exhausting. The associates actually get really burnt out, and they get really, really frustrated because the team members just don't respect them. And I've seen it so many times, and they kind of get themselves in this trap of where they just become buddies. And then the owner doctor usually is struggling because they see that, and they want them to mature and be more of a leader, and they're just stuck in this cycle. So do you see that a lot? And I guess even what is your take or feedback on something like that?
100%. And I like how earlier you had said that it's not just always new grads, it's even doctors who have been out for a while. I think dentistry really struggles with a leadership problem. I think there are not enough people investing in themselves in being leaders. And I think there's a confusion, like you had said earlier, that, they kind of want to buddy buddy with the team. And again, I understand that, right? We all want to be liked by people. But at the end of the day, it's about what is for the greater good of the business and the patient. And it's not just kind of about me and am I going to be liked. And sometimes as part of leadership, this is a hard pill to swallow, but you make decisions or you do things that are not going to be popular with everyone because it is for the greater good. And as a leader, you have to see kind of the future. You have to see what's going to happen if I make this move. So I could not honestly agree with that more. I see that all the time as well. And the best we can do is coach our doctors. But again, it goes back to mindset. If they want to do it, they kind of have to be the ones who are ready to soak up that coaching. And if they're not, it's impossible for us to get anywhere with that.
Yeah, I love the idea of leadership coaching right out the gate, because I don't think people really understand what leadership is a lot of the time. And that when you come in and when you do have on that white jacket or the doctor in front of your name, there is a sense of the team does look to you, and there is a sense of quote unquote status in the office, and they're looking for leadership. And I think that's something that is misunderstood, especially by people who want to be people pleasers or be liked. The way the world works is there's leaders and there's followers, right? And that's just how it works. And I've been a leader a lot of times. I've also been a follower a lot of times. And you need that. If we were all leaders, we'd, I don't know, spin off into space, I think. But I guess we are spinning in space, so I don't know. Bad analogy, but you know what I mean. And so you need people that are leaders and followers. And most of the time, most of your team members, they're looking for leadership.
Mhm.
They want to be led. And I mean, I also work with teams all the time. And every single team that I work with says, we want leadership. We need better leadership. Like, we don't know what we're doing, right? And then the leaders are trying to be really cool and likable, and they're not great at leadership because they haven't been trained in it. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're great at everything. And I say this all the time too. So you could be a fantastic clinician. I mean, you could be one of the best in the nation. It doesn't mean you're good at leadership, right? And I think that's where the misunderstanding gets, especially for high achieving competitive docs, where it's like, well, if I can run a business or if I'm really good at clinical stuff, then surely I should be able to figure out this leadership thing. And no one wants to admit that they suck at it, because then that means failure, right? And so it's like, to be able to just admit, like, yeah, I'm a fantastic clinician, need help in my leadership, or I'm great at running my business, but I'm actually not so great at running my home, right? I'm not great in my marriage. I need help there. Or I'm not great at parenting. I need help there. And so I think having that vulnerability, and for me, like in the leadership work that I do with, women in dentistry, it's like I have this firm belief that leadership is personal and professional, because you can't lead in business if you can't lead in your own life. And one of those places will be held hostage if there isn't that alignment and that full integration. So that's why a lot of people who have messy personal lives will take it out on the business, right? Or vice versa. And so if people really get that, and even if you're a younger associate and you're like, I don't want to own a practice, I want to be an associate for life. And I know a lot of people are taking that route because they're not insane like you. And so they want to just come in and do dentistry and peace out. But, if they invest in the leadership, it's actually personal. It'll really enhance their personal life, because at some point, you need those same skills, like if you're not showing up on time for patients or morning huddles or team meetings or whatever, chances are you're probably not showing up on time for stuff in your personal life either, right? So these behaviors follow you wherever you go. And I think that's something that I wish a lot of people would get, that leadership doesn't mean like managing people. It's, like you're saying, an inside job and a mindset and a way of being, a way of showing up in life and work,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think at the end of the day, it's who you are, right? There's no point. I agree, right? We've seen things about like CEOs doing kind of like shady things and being caught in their personal lives. And it's like, well, if that's who you are in your personal life, I probably wouldn't trust you as a leader either, right? It's showing up in your business the same way that you show up in your personal life. I think that really speaks to character.
Hey, yo, let's hear it for the team over at Mango, who's sponsoring today's episode. Everybody knows who Mango is in the dental industry. Why? Not just because they have a killer product and amazing customer service, but they also have an incredible company with a badass culture. And hey, if you are going to support a company in dental, why not support a company that really takes care of not just their customers, but also their team? But how does Mango help you have less time on the phone and more time with your patients? Well, ultimately, they have this amazing AI where it actually automatically transcribes and summarizes your calls directly into your practice management system, which eliminates manual note-taking altogether. It's so user-friendly. You can easily drag and drop to build a system you need when it comes to call flows. You can work anywhere with their amazing mobile and web app for remote flexibility. And hey, they do have that real person customer service where you can actually talk to a human being in less than 90 seconds. And the AI is just extraordinary. Everybody knows about it. It's pretty rad. And you're going to want Mango in your office. And hey, what is also really awesome is you're not stuck in some drag out contract. And you also get free phones when you sign up with Mango. So thanks, Mango, for being rad and supporting the Real Talk of Dental. So you've obviously invested in growing yourself, personally and professionally. What's been your biggest blind spots, like for you? Where are you on the struggle bus, still trying to figure it out?
I think for me, probably I'm grappling the most right now, and I'm gonna be completely open and honest here with how to deal with new grad dentists who are, for the first time, a different generation than I am. I remember for me, and I'm gonna sound like this like old school person. That's like it's kind of like when we were growing up, right? The older people would be like, I walked up the hill both ways in the snow. And I feel like that's me right now. And I'm trying to work on that because I'm like, actually, I used to go in, I practiced full time for 14 years. And the first probably, I don't know, 7 years of that, actually longer, I did 6 days a week and also I would leave home around like 7:38. I wouldn't get home till 8:30. And now I have this different generation coming in saying, I don't want to work more than 30 hours a week. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because the patients need you. And if you're done at 4, when are they going to come in? Because they're also working. So I think for me, at first I was kind of like, why aren't they doing this? But I have to at some point understand that the world has changed and figure out how to move along with that. That's kind of my next set of work I have to do on myself to learn how to manage and how to lead people that think differently than me in that sense.
Yeah, that's a big one. I know I just saw, I think Gary Vaynerchuk was on CBS News or something. I'm not sure if you saw clips of that interview, but he's been on this big rant lately about celebrating losing because losing is where the learning and the lessons happen. And he is blaming parents. So he's saying how this new kind of parenting, because he's saying technology isn't the enemy here and consumption isn't the enemy because we've all been buying and consuming since, the early days of marketing in like the 50s or something. But this sort of coddling of parents and society, it doesn't really create this toughness and this perseverance and this resilience that I think people from our generation and earlier have. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, a client of mine, and I was like, we were built for survival, And I remember when COVID happened, I was like, I am ready for this. Like, are you kidding? Like, I've trained my whole life for this. I know how to be alone with my thoughts and like have the outside world. Like, I know how to eat out of a can, I know how to eat pasta for 3 months. Like, I can do this. And it's just funny because we have this toughness and this resilience. And again, people had mixed reviews, of course, in the comments and things like that. But it's this nurturing of, and he was talking about being against, participation trophies and certifications and like, no, you don't get rewarded for trying. You don't get rewarded for showing up. And I think that is sort of a difference in how people were raised. And he was almost promoting, getting whooped again and that parents need to like hit their kids. And I'm like, all right, that's interesting take. Some of the therapists in the comments weren't too pleased, but yeah, I mean, I get it. And then it's also these expectations, right? Because people are exposed to lifestyles that, I mean, for me, it was like what I saw on the cover of magazines. And I remember that show, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And I was like, whoa. But aside from that, you weren't really exposed to much. You just kind of saw what was in your neighborhood or in your schools and things like that. But people are seeing celebrities, and there's still this obsession with celebrity culture and influencers and everyone's lifestyles, and everybody wants what everybody else has. And so you're also battling against that false reality. And that's something I've heard a lot about too, is the fantasy versus the reality. And so what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are, I guess, with new grads coming out? Like, what fantasy are they envisioning or living in that you're seeing consistently?
Yeah, I think the idea of, they're going to be multimillionaires 2 years out of school, that they're going to be, taking home an income of 4 or 500,000 a year in. It's just very unrealistic, right? Because here's the thing, in dentistry, you kind of eat what you kill. So if you have a patient in the chair and they don't like you, or you can't communicate treatment to them, or you are not the one getting the patient to the treatment, I think there's like a confusion in that the person making $25 an hour should be selling your $10,000 treatment plan. But what is their incentive to do it compared to you as the doctor who makes 35% of that case, right? To us, we tell our doctors, we're like, you are the one in the driver's seat. When you are in that operatory, you are the clinical leader. So just understanding those numbers. We have an associate, she's great, but we asked her, what is it that you want to make? What do you want your income to be? And she said, I want my income to be $300,000. We said, great, that's awesome. Do you know what you need to produce? And she goes, I don't know, I think she said like 5 or 600,000. We said, okay, that math does not math, because tying back to that, I saw a post recently where somebody, this associate had, an anonymous associate had posted that they were making 30% and that they wanted a raise. They wanted to make more than 30% because, and I quote this, the owner is taking 70% of everything I produce. No, the owner is not taking 70% of everything you produce, because to run a business costs a lot of money, right? There's also payroll for everybody else. There are all the other expenses. There's malpractice insurance. There's utilities. The list goes on and on. There are bills that I didn't even know knew existed, right? One of our practices, the county charges on equipment you already own. They have a tax on equipment you already own every year. So there's all these things that I think they don't fully understand. And I think the second part to that is that your skills will come with time. This is a patience game. We have to first build the skills of being able to communicate, then keep adding CE. Stop referring everything out. If you refer everything out, you are not going to be able to make the income you want to make. And I know there's this fear that's been created that they're a specialist, you should refer everything to a specialist. Not true. Go get trained. I'm not telling people to go watch a YouTube video and start doing all on X's. Go get trained and find a mentor and learn how to develop those skills. And you'll get to where you want to be, but I think there's so much of this like overnight success thing. None of it's overnight successes. Almost nobody is an overnight success. So I would just say patience is kind of the biggest thing I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I really love that you highlight is the idea of the title trap and kind of chasing titles. And I really appreciate you bringing light to that, because I see that a lot as well, especially on teams where people want a specific title. And then I'm often like, well, make sure you know what you're getting into when you agree to that title. And you might not want it. And just in life, I mean, I think in general, there's this idea of, again, status, and that's been kind of coming up for me over the last couple weeks in general, where I think as a society we can sort of get into this trap of status, that somehow if somebody has a certain title, that they're worth more or better or whatever. And I like what you said, I think before we started our conversation, was just being in our zones of genius, and really being able to express ourselves where we're gifted. And sometimes that always comes with a different title for certain people, and it's whatever story we make up about that title. And also, again, of course, there's societal pressures, but you really have to get to the root of what's important to you, right? If you want that space in your life where you have, more autonomy or flexibility and things like that, that sometimes comes with a payoff, right? Than somebody who's going to be working really long hours and going hard, or even doing bigger procedures or bigger cases. And there's a lot in there that I don't think people really take the time to tease out the reality and the nuance and the logistics even of whatever someone's chasing. What's something that you've seen inside your business where that's brought you to the point where you're consistently talking about the idea of a title trap?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of people, it's kind of just like material things, right? People want the big house or the fancy car or whatever it may be to show others that they've made it. But what do they say? They say that wealth is what's hidden. In the same way, right? I think when people are chasing titles, look, I don't want to be unrealistic and say titles don't matter. Like you said, in society, people do care about titles. But also back to what you said, you have to be ready to, if you get a title, that is a direct reflection of the impact and the value that you bring to an organization. So if you want that title and then you say, but you know what? I don't want to go into work. I'm going to work from home 3 days a week and I'm not going to be available. I'm going to go in at 1 p.m. That is not bringing value. That's not bringing impact. The higher up you go, the more responsibility you have and the more time out of your day it's going to take. So you have to be prepared for what it is that you're asking for and know that there is that trade-off. Something's got to give. There's health, wealth, family, and work. Two of those to be really successful. I read somewhere you have to give up two of those at any given time. So,
Mhm.
if you want that work to really, I want to be whatever, director of operations, just know that you are going to be working harder and longer than somebody who is fine being a patient care ambassador, taking calls at the front desk.
One of my mentors always says money follows value creation. and to always focus on creating value for others, and money will follow, versus chasing the money. I think a lot of people chase titles because they're chasing money too. And if they're leading with that and not bringing the value behind it to back it up, that's where, things can get a little nutty. And he also has, financial capital, mental capital, and relationship capital. And I always really like that too, because it teases out like the different kinds of quote unquote wealth. And, some people can have a lot of financial capital, but be completely bankrupt when it comes to relationship capital. And I always say that I'm very rich in mental and relationship capital. But that's what's important to me. You know what I mean? So I love my relationships and I pour a lot into them. And there's people I know that struggle with that. They struggle maintaining relationships if you're not with them all the time with communication. But I'm someone that is always following up with people, connecting with people, nurturing relationships, because that's something that's important to me. That's something that I value. But not everybody values that, and that's okay. So, I like everything you're saying too, because it's really getting to the root of what does a person want, why do they want it, and then fulfilling on that to design a life that they really like, and recognizing that with that also comes ease. Because when you're in that, flow state and you're doing something that's more aligned for you, just the law of physics, money does follow. So if you're constantly shoving yourself into something and going against your natural state, it'll be really hard to maintain that. And then also energetically, the exchange won't be as fluid. So I think so many people are afraid to be themselves and, like you were saying earlier, be in their gifts, because they think, well, there's no way I can be in my gifts and still be successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, like you said, it's knowing who you are, right? If you want a certain title, but you don't necessarily have the skills for that, or your personality doesn't match that, you're going to be miserable the entire way along. And again, you're probably not going to build a whole lot of value. So I completely agree with that. It's knowing who you are and kind of following that path, because if you're happy with what you do, and I hate to be that person that says follow your passion, but yeah, kind of in a way, follow what it is that you really enjoy, because you'll be able to do it a lot longer and be able to do a much better job at it.
So where are you finding the pocket these days? Where do you think your zone of genius is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think honestly, operationally creating systems, I think that's really where I think I'm good at that. That doesn't mean that I want to do that forever though, but that's currently what I'm good at and what I'm building. Over time though, I think that's one of those things that, I look at everything as like a chapter in life, right? So I did the dentist chapter where I practiced for 14 years and, I really enjoyed it. And then I was like, okay, it's time to step back from that and now go into the coaching chapter and the building systems chapter. And I don't know what the next one's going to look like, but it's continuously reiterating and continuously designing the life that you want to live in that period of time.
And there's a lot of really ambitious docs out there that are looking to, follow in your footsteps as well and acquire and build offices. What would you say to them, I suppose? What would be your words of wisdom if they're looking to expand?
Yeah, I'll just tell you, my husband, he talked to somebody a couple of years out of school who was interviewing to be an associate with us. This was a couple of years ago. And he asked this associate, so what is it? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? And this associate who had never kind of owned a practice, done any of that, he goes, well, I want to be where you are. And that was all great, but he gave him the words of wisdom that I would give anyone that wants to go down this path, which is just know all the sacrifices you'll have to make. You are going to sacrifice sleep. You are going to sacrifice peace to some extent. You really, again, have to be very resilient. So just know that. And, you have to be able to live with uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in this. And the bigger you get, there's more weight on your shoulders because you are responsible for the lives of so many people, not just your team members, but their families, because they're all relying on you. And I hate to make it all sound doom and gloom, but I just want to prepare anyone wanting to go down this path that there's a lot of reality to it. There's also impact and there's value, but you have to get through all of that to be able to see the other side.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it's kind of that idea, right, of choosing to suck, as, talked about with Nathaniel Baker. a while back, and don't just focus on the upside. That's something that I always say too to folks that are looking to make a pivot or a big decision. It's like, let's talk about all the negative aspects of this choice, and can you live with that? That's actually how I make decisions now too, because we can totally get stuck in the fantasy trap and the upside, and that's all really attractive, but you really have to be comfortable with the downside, because like you're saying, that's the stuff you have to consistently push through. And most people don't look at the downside, they just look at the upside of things, and then also recognizing what you have to invest in to navigate it, because clearly you can't do it alone, right? As you're learning and investing in all the different parts of yourself and your business and your marriage and things like that. So, well, you're amazing. And I'm so glad that you're in the dental space doing what you're doing. And I love that you're sharing your journey and you're really open about it. And again, that's one of the things that really drew me into a lot of your content. What you stand for is obviously you have success and you're not afraid to talk about the parts of it that a lot of people don't talk about, because it can get glamorized. And I think it's misleading, and you got to fall in love with the journey to some degree. And like you're saying, still have that level of insanity and be like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I still am. And just keep moving forward and embrace it, embrace these parts of you. And even for me, over the last couple of years, I have a spiritual advisor that I'm really close with. Obviously, we talk weekly, but she's just like, the capacity that you have, Brandi, she's like, I could never operate at the level that you operate with the amount of output that I have. And she was just saying it as an observation. But for me, because I'm a perfectionist and I want everyone to be proud of me, I was like, oh, well, should I be less ambitious and should I have less drive? And I really struggled with that. And I felt this internal tension with myself all the time, because it was like, I wanted to keep going, but then I was like, oh, but I need to be more chill. I need to be like way more cool about this and not try so hard. And honestly, before we got on, I was talking about Timothée Chalamet and my appreciation for him, because a couple years ago when he was doing his Dylan tour, when he did the movie on Bob Dylan, he came out and said, I want to be one of the greats. And he declared it on the stage, and he did get some negative feedback because people were like, who do you think you are saying you want to be great? And I was like, it's fucking awesome. Jesus putting a stake in the ground, no, I want to be a badass. And he jokes, he says, yeah, people call me a tryhard, but I don't care because I'm so committed to my work. Why wouldn't I want people to know about it? And I was like, that's really cool. And, being a recovering Gen Xer, that, we're all lurking in the bushes and not supposed to be seen, and hiding out all the time. It's like, oh yeah, let's be vulnerable and be out here and really embrace these parts of myself that want to go for stuff, and I have the capacity to do it. So if I continue to shut myself down because I want to be more like Kumbaya and Burning Man about it, then it's actually causing more heartbreak than it is just being myself, It's like, yeah, I'm going to go hard. Why not? Might as well. If I still have the energy, let's do this, So I think it's embracing all parts of ourselves too in the journey.
It takes all kinds of people, right? You were talking about how you thought maybe you should be more chill and whatnot, but I really think the world takes all kinds of people to make it work. And, if we didn't have someone as awesome as you, we wouldn't have kind of leadership going on and women's focus in leadership. So I think just being really comfortable in who you are and knowing that what you have is a unique way of providing value to the world, that's kind of what I think it's all about.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you and I both hold very close the idea of personal development and self-awareness. And I always say self-awareness is the key to the kingdom. And once you really get to know yourself, it kind of sets you free in a lot of ways. And then having the courage to admit, I need help in these areas, or I'm not great at this, which it sounds like you're on that part of your leadership journey now, is recognizing hey, what's sustainable and what's not. So hats off to you for that. Oh yeah, Dr. Anushka, you're just awesome. I'm a big fan. So keep doing what you're doing. And really grateful that there's women like you that are leading in the way that you do and continuing to be vocal about it and continuing to grow and be a voice for change and really powerful influence for other people in the industry. So thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, Brandi. Again, this was awesome. And, right back at you. I think I'm very impressed by all you do. And especially for women, right? I think we need that focused help as well. We need people really focusing on us. So I really appreciate everything you're doing for the industry as well.
You just listened to the Real Talk of Dental. If it hit, if it stung, if it made you feel just a little more human, good. That's the point. This isn't about fixing practices. It's about healing people. And if you're brave enough to show up real in this industry, you're my kind of leader. Subscribe, call in, send your wildest workplace confession. And most importantly, don't clean up for anyone. The mess, that's where the magic lives. We'll see you again on the next episode.